It's no surprise that chicken fried steak is an American staple, and for the same crispy, crunchy reasons, the method is one of the best ways to make pork chops as well. Start with 4 thinly sliced pork chops. If you can't find thin ones already prepared, ask the butcher to cut them in half for you. Then pound them out to about 1/4 of an inch thick with a meat mallet or heavy object like this handy pie crust roller. It's important that you make a couple small cuts around the pork so it doesn't curl up when frying and cook unevenly. Now sprinkle each side with a small pinch of salt and set them aside while you mix 1 egg with 1 cup of milk and a couple tablespoons of hot sauce. Then cover all the pork chops with the milk mixture and ideally let them sit in the bowl for at least 20 minutes. Prepare the seasoned flour by adding a 1/2 cup of cornstarch to 1 cup of all-purpose flour, along with 3 generous pinches of salt, a 1/2 tablespoon of black pepper, 1 tablespoon of mustard powder, paprika, and garlic powder, and finally a 1/2 tablespoon of cayenne pepper. Then mix it together very well. You can add or take away any of the seasonings except for the salt and pepper, of course. Now remove each pork chop from the bowl and let the excess liquid drip off, before giving them a coating of the flour. The first round, we just want a light coating, so gently lay each side of the chop in the flour to get most of it covered. Then dunk both sides back in the wet batter and dredge them again in the flour. This time make sure you really press each side into the flour with your hands to create a good coating. It's important to double dip them to create the classic chicken fried crust. You can try to keep one hand for the wet and one hand for the dry, but if you're going to do it right, just accept that your hands will get battered. You also want to use a large baking dish or tray for the flour so you have plenty of room to work with and can keep things neat. The last chop will have the best crust because at this point, some of the wet mixture will have dripped into the dry, creating extra crunchy, pebble-sized clumps of flour. Once finished, you want them to rest on a plate for 20 minutes so the coating can stick very well before frying. In the meantime, add about a 1/2 inch of canola oil to a cast iron skillet or other heavy bottom pan, and bring that to about 375 degrees. Also, make a seasoning to top the pork after frying by mixing 1/2 teaspoon of salt and pepper with a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika and garlic powder, a dash of cayenne, and 3/4 teaspoon of light brown sugar. Test the heat of the oil with a speck of flour and make sure it bubbles. Then carefully drop in the pork chops, placing the rounded side towards the edge of the pan, cooking 2 at a time. You want the oil to be around 375 because the pork will drop the temp a good amount once placed in. It's important that you move the chops around with a fork so they don't stick to each other or the bottom of the pan. You can cover with a screen if you want, but they're so thin they'll only take about 1.5 minutes on each side, so you're probably better off moving them around before carefully flipping with a pair of tongs. As you can see, one of these got a dark spot because I let it sit for too long, so I don't recommend trying to film yours when frying. If you start to hear splattering, that's fine. It's just the juices from the pork coming out as it cooks. After frying for roughly 4 minutes, they should be golden brown on both sides. Take them out to drain on a wired rack, and immediately sprinkle them with a generous amount of the seasoning. Typically, chicken fried steak is served with a gravy made from the leftover oil and flour, but since pork goes well with some sweetness, I like this seasoning, and it allows you to taste the meat better since it's so thin. But you can serve them with whatever sauce or seasoning you prefer before enjoying.